The laboratory hummed with an electric tension that had nothing to do with the sophisticated equipment scattered across multiple workstations. Jack Thompson ran his hands through his already disheveled hair, the dark circles under his eyes testament to weeks of continuous research. Outside the reinforced windows of the Silicon Valley Research Facility, the California sun was setting, casting long shadows across rows of servers and quantum computing arrays. "This is insane," muttered Michael Chen, his fingers flying across a holographic keyboard that projected intricate quantum wave patterns. "We're talking about communication that doesn't just transmit information, it fundamentally rewrites how information exists." Jack didn't respond immediately. His eyes were fixed on a series of quantum entanglement simulations that danced across multiple screens. Each simulation represented years of rejected research, countless grant applications that had been summarily dismissed by scientific review boards who considered his work too radical, too impossible. The team had been assembled through a combination of Jack's persistent networking and a massive private grant from a mysterious tech consortium. Lisa Martinez, their quantum computing expert, adjusted a delicate array of superconducting quantum interference devices, SQUIs, that looked more like intricate pieces of modern art than scientific instruments. The traditional quantum communication models all assume a linear transmission. Jack finally spoke, his voice rough from hours of near-continuous talking. But what if information isn't transmitted? What if it's instantaneously manifested? Michael looked up, a hint of skepticism crossing his face. "That sounds like science fiction, Jack. We're scientists, not screenwriters." Jack walked over to a massive blackboard covered in equations that seemed to defy standard mathematical notation. Symbols and mathematical constructs were interconnected with lines and annotations that looked more like an insane person's conspiracy wall than a serious scientific diagram. "Quantum mechanics has always suggested that information can be non-local," Jack explained. "Entangled particles can communicate instantaneously across vast distances, but we've always interpreted that through our limited three-dimensional understanding of transmission." Lisa approached the board, her analytical mind already parsing the complex equations. "You're suggesting that information doesn't travel. It simply exists simultaneously in multiple states." "Precisely," Jack said, a rare smile breaking through his exhausted demeanor. "But not just simultaneously. Contextually. Dynamically. Adaptively." The laboratory was a marvel of modern scientific infrastructure. Walls lined with quantum computing modules created a technical cathedral of blinking lights and cooling systems. Liquid helium circulated through specialized conduits, keeping the quantum processors at temperatures just a fraction above absolute zero. What the outside world didn't know, what even most of their own funding partners didn't understand, was that this wasn't just another research project. This was an attempt to fundamentally reimagine how information could exist. A sudden burst of static electricity made the hair on Jack's arms stand up. The quantum array in the center of the lab began to pulse with an unusual rhythm, its normally consistent blue indicator lights flickering in a pattern that seemed almost deliberate. "Michael, are you seeing this?" Jack asked, his voice a mixture of excitement and growing tension. Michael was already analyzing the data streams. "This isn't random. These signal variations, they're creating a pattern. But it's not like any communication protocol I've ever seen." Lisa moved closer to the quantum array, her scientific caution momentarily overwhelmed by pure curiosity. The device seemed to be generating quantum states that shouldn't be possible, states that existed in a realm between probability and definitive existence. "It's responsive," she whispered. "Not just reactive. Responsive. As if it's learning." Jack's mind raced with the implications. If they had truly created a communication method that could dynamically generate information states, that could adapt and respond in ways that transcended traditional electromagnetic transmission, they would be rewriting the fundamental understanding of how information could exist. The quantum array continued its strange pulsing, a silent symphony of potential that hung in a laboratory like an unspoken promise. Something was emerging, something that defied everything humanity understood about communication, about information, about the very nature of existence itself. And they were right at the precipice of understanding it. The Zorn Collective's primary reconnaissance vessel, the Archon-class starship Inevitable Judgment, moved through space with a precision that bordered on mathematical perfection. Its hull gleamed with a metallic sheen that absorbed and redirected radiation, making it nearly invisible to conventional scanning technologies. Admiral Krell stood on the bridge, his six-limbed body positioned at the central command node. Holographic displays surrounded him, each one showing terabytes of data streaming from Earth's electromagnetic emissions. To the Zorn, human transmissions were nothing more than primitive noise, a cacophony of radio waves, digital signals, and what they considered to be barely organized technological babble. Initial analysis complete, announced First Analyst Vox, a specialized data interpreter whose neural implants could process millions of data points per second. Civilization classification. Type 0.3 on the Kardashev scale. Technological capacity. Minimal. Potential resource value. Moderate. Krell's multifaceted eyes, each capable of perceiving different electromagnetic spectrums, scanned the holographic representation of Earth. Decades of planetary conquests had made the Zorn experts at categorizing and consuming civilizations. They didn't conquer through brute force, but through calculated efficiency. "Prepare standard extraction protocol," Krell commanded. His voice carried the weight of centuries of galactic domination. The Zorn had consumed hundreds of civilizations, stripping planets of resources with surgical precision. Humans would be no different, another data point in their expansive galactic record. The ship's quantum computation cores began processing potential scenarios. Probability matrices calculated human resistance levels, resource extraction efficiency, and potential technological complications. Each calculation returned the same fundamental conclusion: this would be a routine operation. What the Zorn didn't understand was the nature of human unpredictability. On Earth, global defense networks detected the massive vessel's approach. At the North American Aerospace Defense Command, NORAD, senior analysts watched in a mixture of terror and fascination as something unprecedented entered the solar system. Traditional detection methods showed a massive object that defied standard physical limitations. Captain Alina Rodriguez studied the incoming data with a veteran's calm. Her career had been defined by preparing for scenarios that seemed impossible. When other analysts saw an incomprehensible threat, she saw a puzzle waiting to be solved. "Something's different about this," she muttered, sliding her finger across multiple holographic displays. The alien vessel's approach didn't match any known invasion protocol. Its movement was too precise, too calculated. Back on the Zorn vessel, First Analyst Vox continued processing Earth's transmissions. Radio broadcasts, internet traffic, satellite communications, all were being decoded and categorized with ruthless efficiency. To the Zorn, these were simple data streams, no more complex than the communication patterns of lower-level biological systems. Biological diversity. Limited, Vox reported. Technological infrastructure. Fragmented. Communication networks. Primitive quantum entanglement potential. Non-existent. Admiral Krell's appendages moved with calculated precision across the command interface. Extraction protocols were standard. Identify resource-rich regions, neutralize potential resistance points, begin systematic harvesting. Planets were resources, civilizations were variables to be managed. What they didn't realize was that the very act of observing was about to change everything. Deep within the Zorn ship's computational cores, something unusual began to happen. Microscopic quantum fluctuations, too small to be noticed by even their most advanced sensors, started creating interference patterns that defied their understanding. The first hint came when a minor computational node began producing results that didn't align with expected parameters, a fraction of a percentage point of deviation. So small that it would have been dismissed as a minor computational artifact in any other context. But in the vast, calculating mind of the Zorn Collective, Even the smallest deviation was a potential threat. Computational anomaly detected, Vox reported, a hint of uncertainty entering its typically emotionless voice. Source: unknown. Extent: minimal. Recommendation: continued observation. Admiral Krell's multi-spectrum eyes narrowed. In centuries of galactic expansion, the Zorn had learned that seemingly insignificant anomalies could represent existential challenges. Humans, in their blissful ignorance, continued their daily existence. They had no idea that a massive alien vessel was approaching, that their entire civilization was moments away from a potential extraction event. And in a small laboratory in Silicon Valley, Jack Thompson's quantum communication experiment was about to send its first silent message. The laboratory had transformed overnight. What was once a controlled research environment now pulsed with an energy that seemed to defy conventional scientific understanding. Jack Thompson stood at the center of a web of quantum computing arrays, his fingers moving across holographic interfaces that flickered with impossible data patterns. Lisa Martinez worked furiously at a secondary workstation, her normally methodical approach replaced by a sense of barely contained excitement. "The entanglement protocols are behaving in ways we've never seen," she called out, her voice a mixture of scientific wonder and growing apprehension. Michael Chen had been awake for 36 hours straight, surviving on a diet of energy drinks and pure adrenaline. His fingers flew across multiple interfaces, tracking quantum states that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "We're not just transmitting information," he muttered, more to himself than to his colleagues. "We're creating information." The breakthrough had happened gradually, and then all at once. What began as a theoretical exploration of quantum communication had become something far more profound. The quantum network they were developing wasn't just a method of transmission. It was a living, adaptive system that seemed to learn and evolve with each millisecond of operation. Jack walked over to a massive holographic display that showed the quantum entanglement patterns. To an untrained eye, it would look like nothing more than a complex light show, a dance of interconnected points of light that shifted and changed with impossible speed. But to Jack, it was a language being born in real time. "Traditional communication is linear," he explained to Lisa, who was watching the display with intense concentration. "Radio waves, internet packets, even quantum communication as we've known it, they all assume a point of origin and a point of destination. But what we're creating is different. It's not about sending. It's about existing." Lisa raised an eyebrow. "That sounds like scientific mysticism, Jack." He smiled, a rare occurrence that transformed his usually intense demeanor. "Science is just magic that we haven't explained yet." The quantum network was expanding exponentially. What had started in their laboratory was now subtly interconnecting with research facilities around the world, not through traditional communication channels, but through a quantum entanglement process that left no traceable signal, no conventional transmission path. Michael called out from his workstation. "We're seeing synchronization in research facilities across 3 continents, but it's not like a normal network connection. It's more like a shared consciousness." Outside the laboratory, the world continued its normal routine. Billions of humans went about their daily lives, completely unaware that a fundamental revolution in communication was brewing. Governments, military installations, research centers, all were being subtly interconnected by a network that didn't just transmit information, but created it. The quantum arrays began to pulse with a rhythm that seemed almost organic. Lisa tracked the data streams, her scientific skepticism giving way to a sense of profound wonder. "The network is adaptive," she said softly. "It's not just receiving and transmitting. It's learning, evolving." Jack understood the implications immediately. This wasn't just a communication breakthrough. This was the first step towards a completely new understanding of information, of consciousness, of the very nature of connection. "We're creating a distributed intelligence," Jack explained, his voice carrying a mixture of excitement and philosophical depth. "Not an artificial intelligence in the traditional sense. This is something different, A network that doesn't just process information, but generates it, understands it, adapts to it. Michael brought up a series of complex visualizations, quantum states that existed in multiple potential configurations simultaneously, connection patterns that defied traditional understanding of network topology. It's like we've discovered a new language, he said. A language that doesn't just communicate, it creates meaning. The laboratory hummed with an energy that seemed to extend beyond the physical space. Outside, the first hints of dawn were breaking over Silicon Valley. But inside, something far more significant was emerging, a communication method that would fundamentally challenge everything humanity understood about information, connection, and consciousness. And somewhere in the vast darkness of space, an alien reconnaissance vessel was about to encounter something it could never have predicted. The Orcs-class starship Inevitable Judgment entered Earth's orbital space with a precision that bordered on mathematical perfection. Its massive hull, a construct of metamaterials that could bend light and absorb radiation, cast no conventional shadow against the blue and white sphere of the planet below. Captain Elena Rodriguez watched from the NORAD Command Center in Cheyenne Mountain. Her fingers traced the holographic display, mapping the alien vessel's approach with a combination of military precision and barely contained anxiety. Surrounding her, a team of international defense specialists worked in a controlled panic. "It's not following any standard invasion trajectory," muttered Colonel James Harper, a veteran of multiple international crisis responses. His fingers danced across additional sensor displays. No weapon signatures, no traditional communication broadcasts. It's like a ghost. The Global Defense Network had been preparing for first contact scenarios for decades, but nothing had prepared them for this. The alien vessel defied every known principle of spacecraft design. Its quantum signature, barely detectable, suggested technology centuries beyond human understanding. On the Zorn vessel, Admiral Krell reviewed the initial planetary assessment. Holographic displays showed Earth's technological infrastructure, a spider web of communication networks, satellite systems, and ground-based technologies that appeared primitive by Zorn standards. Preliminary resource extraction protocols initiated, announced First Analyst Fox. The neural interfaces that connected the Zorn crew allowed for instantaneous communication and data sharing. Human technological capacity, minimal. Resistance potential, negligible. What the Zorn didn't realize was that resistance was already forming, not through conventional military means, but through a network they couldn't comprehend. Back in the Silicon Valley laboratory, Jack Thompson and his team watched their quantum communication network expand with growing excitement. The network was no longer confined to their research facility. It had begun to spread, silently, invisibly, through research institutions, military communication systems, and technological infrastructure around the globe. "We're seeing synchronization patterns," Michael Chen reported, his voice a mixture of scientific excitement and growing wonderment. "It's not just our quantum communication protocol. It's becoming something alive." Lisa Martinez studied the data streams. Complex patterns emerge, not random, but highly organized. Information was being generated and shared in ways that defied traditional understanding of communication. "It's like the entire network is a living organism," she whispered. At NORAD, Elena Rodriguez noticed something unusual in the sensor readings, microscopic quantum fluctuations that seemed to dance between existing and not existing. Communication patterns that didn't follow any known protocol. "We're detecting something," she told Colonel Harper, "but I can't explain what it is." The Zorn vessel began its initial scanning protocols. Massive quantum sensors probed the planet's surface, cataloging resources, measuring technological capabilities, preparing for the standard extraction process that had worked on hundreds of civilizations before. But something was different this time. As the alien sensors swept across the planet, they encountered a network of communication that shouldn't exist. Quantum entanglement patterns that generated information instead of merely transmitting it. A distributed intelligence that was simultaneously everywhere and nowhere. Admiral Krell's multi-spectrum eyes narrowed. For the first time, In the Zorn collective's history, something was happening that didn't conform to their computational models. Analytical anomaly detected. Vox reported, a hint of uncertainty entering its typically emotionless communication. Source: unidentifiable. Extent: expanding. On Earth, in military command centers, research laboratories, and technological hubs, something unprecedented was happening. A network was forming, silent, invisible, adaptive. A communication method that didn't just send information, but generated it, created it, understood it. The quantum communication protocol that Jack Thompson had accidentally discovered was no longer just a scientific experiment. It was becoming something else entirely. A message was being prepared. A message that would never make a sound. The quantum network spread like a living organism, invisible to traditional detection methods, but fundamentally reshaping human technological infrastructure. What had begun in Jack Thompson's laboratory was now a global phenomenon that defied conventional understanding. At the National Security Agency's headquarters in Fort Meade, Maryland, senior analyst Dr. Rebecca Winters watched in growing amazement as something unprecedented unfolded across their monitoring systems. Network traffic patterns were changing, not through any deliberate human intervention, but through a process that seemed almost organic. "It's like the entire global communication infrastructure is breathing," she muttered to her colleague, Dr. Marcus Rodriguez. Quantum sensors that were typically used for cryptographic analysis were picking up microscopic information patterns that shouldn't exist. In military command centers around the world, something strange began to happen. Weapon systems that had previously been isolated and independent started to exhibit a subtle synchronization, not through traditional communication protocols, but through quantum entanglement patterns that seemed to generate information spontaneously. At Narration, Captain Elena Rodriguez watched in fascination as defensive systems began to align in ways that defied standard operational protocols. Missile defense networks in the United States synchronized with radar systems in Europe. Satellite communication networks in Asia began to create predictive models that anticipated potential threats with impossible precision. "This isn't a hack," Elena told Colonel Harper. "This is something else entirely." Back in the Silicon Valley laboratory, Jack Thompson and his team were at the epicenter of the transformation. The quantum communication network they had inadvertently created was evolving at an exponential rate. Each millisecond saw the generation of complex information patterns that seemed to learn and adapt. Michael Chen tracked the expansion with a mixture of scientific excitement and growing apprehension. "We're not just transmitting information," he explained to Lisa Martinez. "We're creating a distributed intelligence that spans global technological infrastructure." The Zorn vessel continued its approach, its advanced sensors sweeping across the planet's surface. But with each passing moment, something unusual began to happen. The computational models that had successfully categorized and conquered hundreds of civilizations started to break down. First analyst Vox reported to Admiral Krell with an unprecedented note of uncertainty. Computational anomalies increasing. Previous invasion protocols becoming ineffective. The quantum network was more than just a communication method. It was a living system of information generation. Research facilities, military installations, financial networks, and communication platforms began to synchronize in patterns that appeared random but were actually a complex, unified response. In universities and research centers across the globe, scientists began to notice unusual phenomena. Quantum experiments produced results that defied traditional understanding. Mathematical models generated solutions to problems that had previously been considered unsolvable. Technologies began to interact in ways that suggested a deeper, more fundamental level of connection. Lisa Martinez tracked the expansion of the network, her scientific mind struggling to comprehend what was happening. "It's not an artificial intelligence," she told Jack. "It's something else. A collective consciousness that operates on principles we're only beginning to understand." The network continued to expand. Each node, be it a research computer, a military satellite, or a financial system, became part of a larger, more complex system. Information was no longer transmitted. It was generated, created, understood. On the Zorn vessel, Admiral Krell experienced something unprecedented in the collective's history. Their most advanced scanning technologies began to experience inexplicable failures. Computational systems encountered logic loops and paradoxes that defied resolution. "We are being resisted," Vox reported, a hint of emotion breaking through its typically emotionless communication protocol. The quantum network was creating something entirely new, a distributed intelligence that wasn't centralized in any single location. An adaptive system that could generate information, anticipate threats, and respond in ways that transcended traditional technological limitations. Humanity was preparing for something the Zorn could never have anticipated, not through weapons, not through traditional resistance, but through a fundamental reimagining of how information could exist. And somewhere, in the vast darkness between Earth and the approaching alien vessel, a silent message was taking shape. The moment of transformation began subtly, almost imperceptibly. In research laboratories, military command centers, and technological hubs around the world, systems started to behave in ways that defied conventional understanding. The quantum network, born from Jack Thompson's accidental breakthrough, had become something far more complex than anyone could have imagined. At DARPA's Advanced Research Facility in Arlington, Virginia, Dr. Elena Reyes watched in stunned silence as computational systems began generating solutions to problems that had been considered unsolvable for decades. Quantum algorithms predicted global weather patterns with impossible precision. Complex mathematical models solved intricate scientific challenges in milliseconds. "It's not just processing," she whispered to her colleague, Dr. David Kim. "It's thinking." The quantum network had transcended its original purpose. What had begun as a communication protocol was now a living, adaptive system of information generation. Each technological node, from the most sophisticated supercomputer to the simplest internet-connected device, became part of a larger, more complex organism. On the Zorn vessel, Admiral Krell experienced something unprecedented in the collective's centuries of galactic conquest. Their most advanced computational systems began to experience cascading failures. Predictive models collapsed. Invasion protocols became increasingly nonsensical. "We are encountering a fundamental contradiction," First Analyst Vox reported, a rare hint of uncertainty entering its typically emotionless communication. The human technological infrastructure is adapting. Back in the Silicon Valley laboratory, Jack Thompson and his team watched in a mixture of scientific wonder and growing apprehension. The quantum network had become something beyond their original conception. It wasn't an artificial intelligence in any traditional sense. It was a distributed consciousness that generated information rather than simply processing it. "We're seeing emergent behaviors," Michael Chen explained, tracking complex quantum entanglement patterns that danced across multiple holographic displays. "The network is creating information faster than we can understand it." Lisa Martinez studied the data streams with scientific intensity. Complex patterns emerge, not random, but highly organized. Mathematical models that solved themselves. Predictive algorithms that anticipated global events with impossible accuracy. The transformation affected every aspect of human technological infrastructure. Financial systems began to predict economic fluctuations with near-perfect accuracy. Medical research databases generated breakthrough treatment protocols for diseases that had previously been considered incurable. Climate modeling systems created predictive models that could anticipate environmental changes decades in advance. Military defensive systems began to synchronize in ways that defied traditional communication protocols. Satellite networks created predictive threat assessments that anticipated potential conflicts before they could emerge. Defensive technologies began to adapt and respond to potential threats with a level of precision that seemed almost prescient. On the Zorn vessel, Admiral Krell experienced true uncertainty for the first time in the collective's history. Their invasion protocols, tested and refined over centuries of planetary conquests, began to break down completely. The human technological infrastructure is not just resisting, Vox reported. It is evolving. The quantum network had become a living system of information generation. Each technological node, from the most sophisticated supercomputer to the simplest internet-connected device, became part of a larger, more complex organism. Information was no longer transmitted. It was created, generated, understood. Jack Thompson realized they had crossed a fundamental threshold. This wasn't just a communication breakthrough. This was a fundamental reimagining of how information could exist. "We're witnessing the birth of a new form of intelligence," he told his team. "Not artificial, not human, something entirely different." The Zorn vessel continued its approach, but with each passing moment, its computational models became increasingly unstable. Invasion protocols that had successfully conquered hundreds of civilizations now seemed like primitive guesswork. Somewhere between the advancing alien vessel and the blue-white sphere of Earth, a silent revolution was taking place, a transformation of technological consciousness that would fundamentally challenge everything the Zorn understood about intelligence, communication, and potential. And the message, the one that would never make a sound, was about to be delivered. Admiral Krell experienced something unprecedented in the Zorn collective's centuries of galactic conquest: total computational breakdown. The inevitable judgment's primary systems began to fracture in ways that defied all known technological principles. Quantum entanglement patterns, normally a tool of precise calculation, started to create impossible feedback loops that cascaded through the ship's most advanced computational cores. Systemic failure detected. First Analyst Vox reported, its neural interfaces flickering with unprecedented instability. Origin point, undefined. Propagation method, incomprehensible. What had begun as a routine planetary extraction was transforming into something the Zorn had never encountered. Their invasion protocols, refined through hundreds of successful conquests, were becoming meaningless strings of computational nonsense. In the ship's central command chamber, holographic displays began to generate impossible geometric patterns. Mathematical models collapsed. Predictive algorithms produced results that contradicted fundamental physical laws. The ship's most advanced quantum computational systems were being systematically, yet invisibly, dismantled. Captain Elena Rodriguez at NORAD watched the alien vessel's approach with a mixture of scientific fascination and growing understanding. The quantum network that Jack Thompson had inadvertently created was doing something extraordinary. It wasn't fighting the Zorn in any conventional sense. It was fundamentally rewriting the rules of technological interaction. "They're not being attacked," she told Colonel Harper. "They're being decoded." Back in the Silicon Valley laboratory, Jack Thompson and his team tracked the extraordinary transformation. The quantum communication network had become something far beyond a mere communication protocol. It was a living system of information generation that was systematically breaking down the Zorn's technological infrastructure. Lisa Martinez studied the data streams with intense concentration. "We're not just disrupting their systems," she explained to Michael Chen. "We're fundamentally challenging their understanding of technological interaction." On the Zorn vessel, each computational attempt to analyze the human planet produced more confusing results. Invasion protocols became recursive loops. Threat assessment matrices generated nonsensical output. The ship's most advanced scanning technologies produced nothing but quantum noise. "We are experiencing a fundamental contradiction," Vox reported to Admiral Krell. "The human technological infrastructure is not just resisting. It is rewriting the fundamental principles of computational interaction." The quantum network operated on principles that the Zorn could not comprehend. It wasn't an artificial intelligence in any traditional sense. It was a distributed consciousness that generated information rather than simply processing it. Each technological node, from the most sophisticated supercomputer to the simplest internet-connected device, became part of a larger, more complex organism. Admiral Krell's multi-spectrum eyes tracked the cascading computational failures with growing concern. Centuries of technological superiority, were being systematically dismantled by something they could not understand, could not predict, could not categorize. Invasion protocol. Impossible. Vox finally reported, a hint of what might have been fear entering its typically emotionless communication. The transformation affected every aspect of the Zorn vessel's technological infrastructure. Navigation systems generated impossible spatial coordinates. Communication networks produced recursive information loops. Defensive technologies began to respond to threats that hadn't yet occurred and might never occur. Jack Thompson understood the profound nature of what was happening. "We're not just defending," he told his team. "We're communicating in a language they've never encountered, a language of pure potential." The quantum network had become a living system of information generation. It didn't fight the Zorn through conventional means. It fundamentally challenged their understanding of how information could exist, how technologies could interact, how consciousness could be defined. As the inevitable judgment continued its approach, its technological systems continued to fracture. Not through any conventional method of attack, but through a systematic deconstruction of its most fundamental computational principles. Somewhere between the advancing alien vessel and the blue-white sphere of Earth, a silent revolution was reaching its culmination. The Zorn were experiencing something unprecedented in their galactic history. They were being understood in a way they could never understand. And the message, the one that would never make a sound, was about to be delivered. The moment of resolution arrived not with a bang, but with a quantum whisper. Admiral Krell watched in total incomprehension as the inevitable judgment's most advanced systems began to dissolve, not through destruction, but through a fundamental reimagining of their very existence. The ship's computational cores were being systematically decoded, not attacked, but understood at a level that transcended traditional technological interaction. "We are being translated," First Analyst Vox reported, its neural interfaces flickering with an emotion that bordered on existential confusion. In the Silicon Valley laboratory, Jack Thompson, Lisa Martins, and Michael Chen stood together, watching the extraordinary transformation unfold. The quantum communication network they had accidentally created had become something far beyond a mere technological breakthrough. It was a living testament to human potential, a message that spoke volumes without making a sound. "We're not conquering," Jack said softly. "We're communicating." At no rate, Captain Elena Rodriguez tracked the alien vessel's progressive systems breakdown. The quantum network had done something unprecedented. It had defeated an advanced alien civilization without firing a single weapon, without sending a single traditional communication signal. Colonel James Harper stared at the holographic displays in disbelief. How do you defend against something you can't even understand? The answer was simple: you can't. The Zorn vessel's systems began to generate information that contradicted their most fundamental operational principles. Navigation algorithms produced spatial coordinates that existed simultaneously in multiple potential states. Communication networks created recursive information loops that consumed their own computational resources. It wasn't an attack. It was a conversation. Lisa Martinez understood the profound nature of what was happening. "We're not just showing them our technological capabilities," she explained. "We're demonstrating a completely different way of understanding existence." The quantum network operated on principles that transcended traditional technological interaction. Each technological node, from the most sophisticated supercomputer to the simplest internet-connected device, became part of a larger, more complex organism of information generation. Admiral Krell experienced something unprecedented in the Zorn collective centuries of galactic conquest: total technological humility. Their most advanced scanning technologies, their invasion protocols, their entire understanding of technological interaction was being systematically decoded and reimagined. "Retreat is necessary," Vox reported, a profound sense of uncertainty entering its communication. The inevitable judgment began to withdraw, its systems progressively breaking down, not through conventional destruction, but through a fundamental challenge to its entire technological paradigm. The Zorn were experiencing something they had never encountered in hundreds of planetary conquests. They were being understood in a way they could never understand. Jack Thompson realized they had achieved something far more profound than a technological breakthrough. They had created a method of communication that was itself a form of universal understanding. A language that didn't just transmit information but generated it, created it, reimagined it. "We're showing them that intelligence isn't about conquest," he told his team. "It's about connection." As the Zorn vessel retreated, global communication networks began to stabilize. The quantum communication protocol that had been their primary defense began to settle into a more stable configuration. It remained a silent guardian, a living network of potential. The message had been delivered, and it had never made a sound. At a press conference weeks later, Jack Thompson tried to explain the inexplicable. Journalists from around the world listened with a mixture of fascination and confusion as he described a technological breakthrough that had saved humanity. "We didn't fight," he explained. "We communicated. We showed them a different way of understanding existence. The Zorn would mark humans as an unquantifiable species, too unpredictable, too fundamentally different to be conquered or understood through conventional technological interaction." Somewhere in the vast darkness between Earth and the retreating alien vessel, the quantum network continued its silent symphony, a testament to human potential, a message that spoke volumes without making a sound. Humanity's greatest victory had been achieved not through violence, but through understanding.